Hey guys, I'm going to present to you today, and I'm kind of excited to bring it to you. An explanation of a lot of the lather consistency goals for me, and I put everything down in kind of a line graph uh, to hopefully bring a visual illustration as we talk about it verbally. And if you're a regular watcher of my channel, this will all be very familiar, but just maybe not never boiled down to such a concise and perhaps because of the visual aid, um, easily to digest chunk of information. And so it's mainly in response to a question by Bri, a YouTube viewer, and he asked me, where, how did I come to my lathering times and my consistency? And how I'm interpreting his question is in terms of, because he's asking in the context of the fact that he doesn't have as much time as I do when he's shaving. And it would have never occurred to him to mix a lather for that long. Sometimes I go several minutes it takes to build a lather. I need to time myself sometime, and get kind of an average, whether it's 4 to 6 minutes or longer than that. I'll have to do that sometime and see. But I think that's a really good question. And that led me to my goals, the consistency that I'm trying to achieve. That's the kind of the end answer to all that. And I've always thought that a line chart, something like this, might be really helpful. At least for me, if only just for me. And so many times when you're graphing one thing against another, you've got a line that starts one place and goes down, and then another one that starts at the opposite place, and then a lot of times right where they meet is some special spot, right? Well, that's not the case here, but we do have kind of two lines that we'll talk about. Now, remember the Mythbusters, they talked about fuel efficiency, and they were comparing fuel efficiency if you run your air conditioner versus when you roll your windows down. Well, if you're going, they figured that they plotted the lines when they ran a bunch of data, and they figured out 52 miles an hour with the vehicle they were using was this magical point. And if you're going slower than that, then it's better to just have your windows down, because then your AC is not using up energy. If you're going faster than 52, then it's better to have your windows down and your AC on, because now you're not having the drag of the air on the side of the car because you're moving faster. It affects you more. And so that's a case where that center point was kind of an important figure. That was really neat for me. I've used that a lot. And so we don't have anything too valuable here at the center point. But I wanted to answer his question, and I think the business happens over here, and it'll be fun to tell you guys about that. And so to kind of answer his question, how did I arrive at that point? Well, I'm a kind of an analytical, sciencey kind of person by nature. Just that's the way I'm wired. And so if I get a good lathering 4 minutes on something, then I'm going to try it for 5 minutes at some point and see what I end up with. I'm going to try it for 3 minutes. Now, in my usual shaving, I don't lather for a certain length of time. My main goal during everything is I go until it looks right, if I have the time. And usually I do, because I'm a night shaver. If you're a morning shaver, you may not have that luxury. Whatever you're able to generate in just a couple of minutes may be what you have to deal with, and that's just fine. But for me, the main goal is not the time used to build the lather, but I go until it's done, right? And so the sciencey part had me exploring more soap, less soap, more water, less water, more mix time, less mix time, vigorous mixing, slow mixing. I've tried so many variables just for fun, because that makes me happy. And so then that's how I gradually got to land where I am. I also saw people online who, there are groups of people that talks about if it ain't dripping, you're tripping. And meaning that they like their lather wet, just kind of dripping off their face, dripping off their brush, messy shirt. That's the way they like their lather. And that's okay, obviously, because they're doing their thing, right? I don't quite like mine that wet. But that's kind of a small subset. I think the majority of people like it on the thicker side. And I think a majority of those don't know any better. They don't know this magical world that more water can make them so happy, get them better performance. But each to his own. You just gotta let that go, right? And so a lot of people have it drier, and in my trials, hearing those drippy folks, I would add water and try to chase that down and see, am I happy there too? Or maybe I'm backed off a little bit, and sure enough, I'm backed off a little bit from that. So, and for me, a longer lather time was kind of natural because I almost considered a therapeutic type aspect to my day. If I'm sitting there working in a bowl, chatting with you guys online, or just talking about whatever shaving thing happens to be on my mind that day, or if I'm just being quiet, then that is a peaceful place that I've enjoyed having as a part of my life. As I said, I'm a night shaver and most of the time, and so that affords me a little bit of luxury because you can usually take a little bit more time there. And so my goals in terms of lathering, and so this is going to be relevant for you, because if you're a person who likes your lather a lot drier than I do, then that's going to affect how you interpret this video, and maybe it's irrelevant for you, and that's okay. I like to take and add a lot of water to a lather. It's still creamy, getting a little bit thinner as it goes, still creamy, and that point where it stops being creamy, that is where I like to stop and then back up just a little bit. Now, obviously, you can't really back up easily, and so I try to stop right before I hit to that point where it's no longer creamy, because, man, I want that combo of creaminess with as much hydration as it'll take while still being creamy, because then that hydration, that water, that creaminess, the slickness there is going to protect me. It's going to, and that's one of the big things. It reduces irritation, reduces wear on your blades. It feels tremendous on your face with your brush on your skin. If it's still I got some really kind of fatty creaminess, then it feels wonderful on your fingers. And then and this is something I discovered recently that I just enjoy so much about a shave, but I didn't really see it coming, is that rinse. You finished your pass and you go and you splash some water on your face, and that leftover lather that's on your face mixes with that water, and you get this really sweet creaminess and the slickness just comes alive, and that makes me happy. And so I'm trying to achieve that as well. And obviously the highest regard goes to the performance aspects and the protection of your face and the nice glide. I'm wanting nice glide on my razor. If my lather is pasty, then a lot of times it feels scrapey to me. It's less protective for my skin if the lather's too thick and too pasty, because then it doesn't bond with my skin is a word that I often use. It just doesn't seem to let the blade move over it as easily. It's not as lubricative. When you put your fingers on a kind of a dry lather, it can feel really slick, but somehow that doesn't translate to the blade sometimes. And so then I would find myself with irritation. I'd add some more water, and then bam, now the razor's got excellent glide, easy movement, effortless. And then that slickness that's kind of just sunk into my skin is protective. That's what I want as well. And so there we go. Those are kind of my goals at what I'm going to explain here. And I thought about it, and I started drawing lines, and I worked on this for a few iterations. Now this is my draft, right? Peak Performance Lather Theory by Sgrdddy Shaves. Here we go. All right, we've got our two lines. Okay, now as we start here and move across, this is the time duration of the shave, the amount of mixing, the amount of water we're adding. So if you add water very quickly, then that could scrunch everything up. You know, I mean, it's all relative, of course, and this is not entirely meant to be precise, like the slope of the lines at certain points. This is the kind of the illustration that I'm giving you, and that's the main goal here. I'm entitling this one Standard. We've got three. We've got Standard. We've got what I first called the Late Bloomer, but since blooming is a shaving term, we're going to call this one the Magic pattern, Paradigm. And then the third one is Good Enough. And the Standard is one that I so often see with some of our better soaps, our more modern soaps, and some older soaps. You know, Tabac, the tallow formula definitely falls into this Standard category. Sterling, both the beef and mutton. You know, Bear and Man, Declaration Grooming, Noble Otter, you know, Summer Break, Storybook. There's a whole host of them. Now, the one that is like magic, I've seen a few happen like this, like Williams, and we'll explain that in a little bit. And a few of them, a very minority, but it's an interesting concept right here. There's this danger zone right here, and we'll talk about that. The Good Enough, now, that's for some of the older stuff with maybe a lot of coconut oil, perhaps, or palm oil, kind of the 2017 before the Strop Shop, Chiseled Face, even the original one. The non-silk tallow version is kind of like this, and we'll talk about that. It's not quite creamy feeling when you put a lot of water in it. But we'll get there. So that's just kind of where we're going. Okay, so the Standard, we've got this darker line here, and this represents the hydration of the soap. I had to pause for a second, gather my thoughts, because I'm looking at it backwards. This is the hydration of the soap. Starts out, or the wetness of the soap. Starts out kind of thick, and then by the time we get down here, we're kind of low, and so we're thin. Okay? We start out kind of thick, and then as we add more water, as we mix in more water to the lather, and then there is a drop-off point here, and that's where the soap kind of breaks. That's where the lather breaks, and you end up with too much water, and it doesn't offer you very much slickness at all. Matter of fact, sometimes the razor can drag there because that I don't know, surface tension or something like that is grabbing the razor. Certain razors will do that if you're too wet, right? Now the other line represents slickness and protection. I believe that protection comes as a factor, as a byproduct of the slickness. If you've got a slick lather on your face, albeit perhaps a thin layer, then you're going to be protected, is my current belief. And so slickness and protection, kind of the same thing. As you move along and add more water to your lather, the slickness starts to grow. And then at some point, there will be a peak where it is as slick as it's going to get due to the water and the soap being in the right combo, that optimum combo. And then if you keep going past that, then you've got a little ways to go before all of a sudden, bam, you've hit that drop off like we had before, where you've broken the lather. It's got the slickness is now not there because it's got too much water in it. Okay, and so here is the crux of everything. This little magical place right here that falls between these two dashes. So we're right in the peak of the slickness. Now, right before here, we're just a little too dry. And then bam, we arrive at this bigger bubble here. And that is where I like to shoot for. Now, ideally, I would land in the A. In the A zone here, that's just a prime area, little highlighted, little bursts there. That is where I want to land because that is the creamiest experience while still being in this wonderful, slick, high performance area. Now, the B zone here, that's where I often end up if I push the lather just a little bit too far. But the good news is that you're still within kind of the peak slickness and performance zone there. And so that's why I bifurcated. I don't get to use that word too often if I'm using it correctly. I bifurcated this nice little perfect zone here. So with the A, that's what I'm heading for every shave. Now, not all soaps will deliver the A, but many of the modern ones, the good ones, will. Mitchell's Wool Fat's another one that's been around for a long time, and it will deliver this. Okay, but right here, you keep adding you got it in that perfect zone, and you keep adding just a little bit too much, and then bam, now you're in B. You're still getting great performance in terms of the slickness. However, luxury. This L right here, this bifurcated line is for luxury. You've now crossed over the luxury threshold, and it doesn't quite feel as creamy. It's still going to do a great job, and so you're still within the performance zone, that peak performance area, but you just don't quite have that creaminess. And often I'm shaving at that point because I just push the envelope so much. Now, some soaps will have kind of a wider little capsule here, and some soaps might have a more narrow one, and that's normal. Okay, and so this luxury line right here divides the prime zone of slickness into luxury, creamy, feels wonderful, and then it's going to get the job done really well, but you've lost that extra bit of feel that maybe you were chasing. And you'll still get a happy shave, no irritation, unless you've messed up with the razor technique. But in terms of at least the lather is protecting you like it should. Now, what's this little C bubble over here? Well, that's what happens if you go a little bit outside the peak. You're starting to drop, and this is when this zone over here is when your razor is going to start to skip a little bit and kind of stutter across your face, because you're starting to get almost too wet. Now, the good news is I've had tons of shaves where I'm in that C zone and I still get a great shave. It's just not quite at the peak. It's still very good in terms of slickness, but you just don't you're not in the peak anymore, but you're still in a pretty good place. Now, after that is when you're gonna really kind of get the skipping and even the razor kind of dragging on your face just a touch due to that surface tension and other kind of concepts. Okay, and so there we go. That's the crux of the matter here. Now, some guys, everybody, you can be anywhere on this line you want because it's your shave, right? And so some guys, they want to shave right here. They don't want to get close to this line, this line where creaminess drops off, this L line right here. They like, a lot of YouTube shavers and face latherers like to stop right around here. And if that's what you're happy with, then go for it. No problem at all. And this, all of a sudden it hit me, this is a great time to illustrate why I'm not a face latherer. Because usually when I get right around to this point, and I'm face lathering, because I'm a bowl lather primarily. If I'm face lathering, right around here, that is when the good stuff starts flying off as I'm working. It's so loose and hydrated. It's heavy because it's hydrated. It comes off my brush too easily. And that's the best stuff. That's what I want to put on my face, and it's falling off. And so I'm left trying to add more water to the brush and that sort of thing. And so it's difficult for me to get into this zone when face lathering, just because as you head that way, your lather starts to fall off your brush. So it was really neat to be able to have a pictorial place to map in my desire to stay with bowl lathering, is because it makes it much easier to hit this zone, for me at least. So there we go. All right, so that's what I find. That's the standard modern paradigm that I so often see. And even new soaps like Hub City Soap Company, And the 345 soaps are they're right around in this level, and it's really neat. So that's this kind of standard one. Cella, for instance, I've been using that lately, and Cella is in that third one that I was talking about, the good enough. You don't quite hit that luxuriously creamy type lather when it's really well hydrated. All right, so now we move to the formerly called late bloomer, but we'll call it the magic because it really is kind of magic, where you start off, it looks kind of soupy, but you actually kind of keep adding water and keep mixing, and then bam, that soupiness starts to, it like activates with the soap, and then you see the lather start to develop, and the slickness, then it starts to grow. The, what is that labeled? Oh, that's the danger line, yeah. The thickness of the lather actually starts to increase at that point. It starts kind of thin. But then if you keep working it, then it starts to thicken up and turn more creamy, right? And I've seen that happen with Williams plenty of time, and I think that can happen if you start out with certain soaps with too much water, more water than that soap really likes to have. Like I can start off with Williams, and it's really more like this, the standard paradigm, where we don't have a hump. It starts off thick and then gradually, because you know what I do? I wait and add water until after I've worked it up for a little bit. All right. So just be aware, there are a few soaps out there that are like this, and I think guys start with too much water in Williams, at least there's the potential to, and I call this the danger zone because since it's kind of watery and wet looking, you think that you don't need to keep going. You put that on your face and it doesn't do a great job because you just needed to go a little further, and then bam, it would have solidified, and then you could have headed toward, and we've got all the same pieces as we did a minute ago. So this part is identical to the first paradigm. Okay, so the trick here is if your soap is like this, Mystic Water may be another one that's kind of like this. There is some potential, if you add water too quickly, for you to have a little trap right here, but just keep going. Okay. All right. So I call that one the magic because all of a sudden you don't know what happened. You don't know what you did. You feel like you did the opposite, and then you added more water, but then it became drier. It became more creamy. It burst. It's almost like that extra water. There is a threshold, some kind of magic threshold, of why I chose that word, where you had to get to that level of hydration before something would trigger in the soap to start churning out lather. And so that's that. Now, the Cella and Strop Shop and so many of them that were made a while back, and even some these days. These are draft names, right? The good enough is where the goal here is you're going to get a slick shave with good performance. It's just that, when you put it between your fingers or you feel of it, it just doesn't give you that creamy, luxurious kind of experience. And that's what I'm talking about here. But it's good enough because you're still getting great performance in some cases. Okay? So, now this one, notice, has a flatter line here. And the little capsule here of kind of the peak slickness, it's not over here. The peak comes earlier. It's not over here like it was with the other two. Okay, so that peak, and that's because you're running it a little drier. That peak right there happens sooner because often with these, at least in my experience, you have to run them a little drier. Otherwise, see, they can peter out kind of quickly, and they're later on in the shave or later on in the mixing process, they're too wet, and so they've lost some slickness points, where the other, you might say better soaps, but it just depends on what your goals are, right? The other soaps have their peak right here. Okay, a little difference there. And this one has a bigger section C, that bigger zone where your razor's kind of skipping a little bit, and but you're still actually getting a close shave. It's just you don't have that kind of slickness feeling, that sort of thing. Okay, and this one, notice it doesn't have that luxury bifurcation line. There's not an A and a B because everything is kind of B. Because A kind of is mysterious, and it doesn't really happen with these types of bases. And maybe they were cheap to make. I don't know exactly why those bases became super popular. Maybe they're easy to lather. Maybe they're more geared to face lathers. I'm not saying I'm the know-all about all this stuff. I'm just showing you guys some of my observations. But I've tried some soaps, no matter what, whether I load too light, I pull it too dry, I take it too wet, try to find in between, and I never find that kind of luxurious feel that I can with some other soaps. And so that is the good enough paradigm. You've still got this nice slickness zone here that will give you performance in your shave, protection for your skin. You've still got that. And so that's why these can be good soaps, especially if you are in a hurry and you don't need to take enough time. You don't need to take time to appreciate the creamy qualities of your lather and to feel like you're in a spa or something like that. And so maybe that's why this guy's even better for your situation, because he gets that as good as he can do. He gets that a little quicker than the other kind. It's my thought. All right, well, there we go. Maybe it'll help some of you guys. I'm really interested to see what kind of conversation we can have about this. Again, this is coming from a bowl lathering perspective in general. There could be some other paradigms if you're a face latherer. You could be experiencing some different things, and that's normal. It's okay. But I don't face lather enough to be able to speak authoritatively about that. It's really cool. I've been really happy, looking forward to bringing this to you guys and share it with you. So, Bri, I hope this addresses the questions that you had, and this is, what I'm heading for, the standard. With most of my soaps, they are the standard kind of paradigm where it does have a luxurious paradise, promised land, where that A, where you get the luxury, you haven't dropped away from luxury into still good performance, but you've dropped away from luxury. You're still in the A. That's where I like to try to shoot every single time. And there we go. Looking forward to discussion with you guys, both on like YouTube or Reddit or wherever. Take care now. This is Sgrdddy Shaves, and I might study on this further and present a more updated version. Maybe I'll do better graphics. I don't know. We'll see. And if there is an update, it'll be like the first line in the description of this video if we supersede this one with something else. Well, I hope this helps you in your shaving journey. I know that it could confuse a really new person, and that would be normal. So maybe if you're really new, don't really worry about all this too much. But if you've been shaving enough to where this kind of makes sense, then great. Hope I helped you out in some way. And critical thinking, some people like that, some people don't. Some people don't want to think, and that's okay too. But if you're like me, kind of sciencey, critical thinking, want to try to chase and try to, because see, if you're chasing this, then if you hit right here or if you hit right here, it's still pretty good. And so it's still a pretty good experience. So I'm happy with that, the way I've been doing it. Take care now, guys. This is Sgrdddy Shaves. All the best to you. Good night.